Rohan Clark tightened the straps of her backpack, the cold bite of early autumn air nipping at her cheeks. The sun was just peeking over the jagged peaks of the Cedar Hollow Mountains, casting long shadows across the narrow dirt road. At 29. Rowan had done plenty of solo hikes before, but today felt different, heavier, as if the mountains themselves were waiting for her. Her friends had joked about her need for solitude. "You're just running away," Lila had teased the night before, sipping coffee in Rowan's cramped apartment. But Rowan hadn't laughed. She wasn't running away from the noise or the chaos of city life. She was running from something. Darker, something she had buried deep inside. The roadside camera blinked silently from its rusted post as Rowan passed by, her figure shrinking among the towering pines. The lens caught her pause, a moment when she glanced back toward the valley, her eyes shadowed with doubt. No one would see that glance except the cold glass of the camera's eye. The trail ahead was narrow and winding, flanked by ancient trees whose leaves burned crimson and gold. Rowan's boots crunched over dry twigs and fallen leaves. She moved carefully, aware of the solitude settling around her like a shroud. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional call of a distant bird. She stopped briefly near a moss-covered boulder, pulling a folded map from her pocket. Fingers trembling slightly, she traced the route with a finger. The mountain was vast, and the path she had chosen was rarely traveled. No cell signal, no checkpoints. Just her and the wilderness. Her breath fogged the chilly air as she stuffed the map away. Rohan pressed forward, each step both escape and confrontation. She wasn't just walking into nature. She was stepping into the unknown of her own life. Memories she had kept locked away, fears she wouldn't admit aloud. Hours later, the trail lay empty. Rowan's footprints marked the damp earth for a time before fading into the wild undergrowth. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it a promise of secrets the mountains would keep, and in the valley below, the roadside camera continued, its silent watch capturing the last known image of a woman who would soon disappear without a trace. 2 days had passed since Rohan Clark vanished into the Cedar Hollow Mountains. At their modest home in town, her parents sat huddled around the kitchen table, faces pale and drawn. The unease that had settled in their hearts was now a heavy weight. Finally, unable to ignore the silence, they filed a missing person report. Outside, search teams fanned out along the winding trails, calling Rohan's name into the thick forest. Volunteers trudged through underbrush, scanning rocky ledges and riverbanks. For hours, the only signs they found were faint footprints, her boot prints pressed into damp earth. Fading quickly as the cold wind scattered leaves across the path, the mountains held their secrets tightly. The sun dipped behind thick gray clouds and rain began to fall, soaking into the soil and washing away tracks. Temperatures plunged overnight, making the search even more dangerous. Yet the teams pressed on. Fueled by hope and dread, Detective Maren Holt arrived on the third morning, her sharp eyes scanning the grim scene. She was no stranger to missing persons cases in remote areas, but something about this one unsettled. Rohan wasn't just a lost hiker. There was a silent urgency beneath the surface. At the base camp, Holt studied maps and interview notes from locals who reported seeing Rowan days earlier. No distress signals, no emergency calls, no sightings beyond that last camera image, she said quietly to the team. Her voice carried a hint of frustration, but also an edge of determination. Holt's gaze lingered on the photographs of Rowan, a woman with curious eyes and a guarded smile. "People don't just disappear in these mountains without a trace," she murmured to herself as rain pattered against the tent's canvas walls. That evening, Holt reviewed the sparse evidence and the fading footprints on the muddy trail. The forest around them was growing darker, colder. Somewhere out there, Rowan was either hiding or in trouble. And Holt knew that time was running out. The next morning promised another day of searching, but the detective's mind raced with questions. What had Rowan been running from? And who or what might still be watching from the shadows? Detective Maren Holt spent the morning walking the outskirts of Cedar Hollow's small mountain town, knocking on weathered doors and questioning anyone who might have crossed paths with Rowan Clark. The locals were wary, mountains bred silence. and suspicion, but one name kept surfacing in hushed tones: Elias Vance. He's lived up there for years, an elderly woman said, glancing nervously toward the tree line. Used to be a park ranger, but something happened. Folks say he's single quotes S. different now. Intrigued, Holt pressed on, learning that Elias's cabin sat deep within the woods, miles from the nearest road. Several witnesses claimed to have seen him speaking with Rowan just days before her disappearance. Some said their conversation was tense. Others mentioned a brief, heated argument, determined to find Elias. Holt navigated the narrow mountain trail, her boots crunching on dry leaves. The air was thick with pine and damp earth. Eventually, the cabin came into view, a modest wooden structure, weather-beaten and half-hidden by towering firs. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney. She knocked firmly on the door. Moments later, a gaunt man with graying hair and sharp, calculating eyes appeared. "Elias Vance, I'm here about Rowan Clark," Holt said steadily. "We need to talk." Elias's expression hardened. "I don't know anything about her disappearance." His voice was low, rough, defensive. He declined to let her inside. Over the next hour, Holt tried to peel back layers of his story. Elias admitted meeting Rowan once, but claimed it was a casual exchange, a warning about the dangers of the northern trails. He refused to elaborate or answer questions about their argument, despite her instincts screaming otherwise. Holt had no concrete evidence linking Elias to Rowan's fate. The man's silence only deepened the mystery, leaving Holt with more questions than answers. As she left the cabin, the dense forest seemed to close behind her, shadows lengthening like fingers reaching for secrets. Elias Vance remained an enigma, a figure caught between help and hindrance, truth and deception. Back at base camp, Holt jotted down her impressions. Whoever Rowan had spoken with before vanishing, the trail was growing colder, and time was slipping away. Detective Marin. Holt returned to town, her mind heavy with the image of Elias Vance's cold refusal. The forest silence had given way to whispered rumors, but no clear answers. Her next lead was closer: Rowan's best friend Lila, who waited anxiously at a small cafe near the town square. Lila's hands trembled as she sipped her coffee, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "Rowan never told me everything," she admitted quietly, voice barely above a whisper. "There were things she wanted to keep hidden, things she was afraid to face." Holt leaned in. "What kind of things?" Lila hesitated, pulling her phone from her purse. Threatening messages. From someone she wouldn't name. They started a few months ago, texts that got darker, more desperate. She scrolled through. A series of blurred screenshots, cold, demanding words, veiled threats, warnings to stop seeing someone. She tried to ignore them at first. Sighed. She didn't want to drag me into it. But I saw how scared she was, especially the week before she left. The detective's mind pieced together a troubling picture: Rowan caught in a toxic web, forced to hide the truth even from those closest to her. Lila hesitated again, then added, "There was betrayal too. Someone Rowan trusted. Someone she thought would protect her." "Did she say who?" Holt asked softly. "No, but I know it cut her deep. She stopped answering calls, shut me out. She said she needed space, said she was going to fix things herself." Tears welled in Lila's eyes. "I wish I had pushed harder." The cafe's quiet hum was suddenly deafening. Holt felt the weight of secrets pressing down. The fractures in Rowan's story were growing wider, revealing shadows darker than the mountains themselves. Outside, leaves swirled in the wind, a restless echo of the turmoil hidden beneath calm surfaces. Holt knew the next step was crucial: uncover who had wounded Rowan so deeply, and what desperate choices led her into the wilderness alone. Months slipped by, winter's icy grip finally loosening its hold on Cedar Hollow. Spring melt swelled, the River Asher turning its usually placid waters into a churning torrent of muddy currents and tangled driftwood. The mountains, once silent under blankets of snow, now pulsed with the thaw's restless energy. On a brisk morning, Jack Murphy, an experienced kayaker, navigated the river's wild bends, enjoying the rush of cold water against his paddle. As he rounded a sharp bend beneath towering cliffs, something caught his eye: a dark, soggy shape wedged between two large logs. Half submerged and battered by the rushing current, curiosity piqued, Jack maneuvered closer and pulled the object. Free. It was a backpack torn and streaked with mud, its fabric faded and soaked. The weight felt unnatural, heavy with the unknown. With trembling fingers, he unzipped the main compartment. Inside lay a battered camera memory card, a single worn hiking boot caked in dirt, and a blood-stained scarf, a splash of deep crimson staining the faded fabric. The scene whispered of violence, of a struggle fought far from safety, Jack's. Breath caught in his throat. The scarf looked eerily familiar, the type Rowan Clark often wore on her hikes. The missing hiker who had become a ghost in the mountains months before. He called the local authorities, heart pounding with the knowledge that the river had finally delivered a clue, but one that raised chilling questions. If these items were found downstream, was it certain Rowan had met her fate in the wilderness? Or was there a darker truth hiding beyond the trees? Detective Maren Holt arrived swiftly, her eyes narrowing as she examined the grim evidence. The river had kept its secrets for months, but now it seemed eager to speak. Each item told a fragment of Rowan's story, a story soaked in fear, violence, and unanswered questions. As the backpack was carefully bagged and transported for forensic analysis, Holt's mind raced. The mountains had claimed many, but this suggested Rowan's disappearance might be tangled with forces far beyond a simple lost hiker. The river's teeth had bitten deep, and the investigation was only beginning to unravel what lay beneath. The surface. The forensic lab was quiet except for the soft hum of machines working tirelessly. Detective Maren Holt stood behind the glass partition, watching as specialists delicately recovered data from the battered memory card found in Rowan Clark's backpack. The card had been waterlogged, mud-clogged, and nearly destroyed by its months submerged in the river. Asher's icy current. Hours passed as the experts coaxed fragments of images from the damaged device. Finally, a series of photos flickered to life on the screen, a puzzle beginning to piece itself together in blurry, haunting frames. One image seized Holt's attention immediately. Rowan, her face pale and eyes wide with fear, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Behind her, a shadowed figure lurked among the trees, barely visible but unmistakably present. The tension captured in the frozen moment spoke of desperation, something more than a simple hike gone wrong. Holt leaned closer as the technician played the images in sequence. Rowan's hurried steps through dense undergrowth, the distant figure gaining ground, her face tightening in panic. It was a silent scream trapped in pixels, yet something didn't add up. The timestamp embedded in the file showed the photos were taken 3 days after the day Rowan was reported missing, a discrepancy that challenged everything the investigation had assumed. Had Rowan survived longer than anyone believed? Had she returned to the mountains, or was this another layer of deception? Questions swirled in Holt's mind as she reviewed the evidence. The images hinted at a chase, a threat, and a secret still hidden deep within the shadows of the forest. But who was the figure following her? And why had Rowan kept this memory locked away, buried in a damaged card? The detective's gut told her this was a turning point, the moment the case shifted from a tragic disappearance to something darker, more sinister. She would have to dig deeper to unravel not just where Rowan had gone, but what had hunted her outside. The wind rattled the windows of the lab, carrying with it the cold reminder that some secrets refuse to stay buried. Theo Maddox sat across from Detective Maren Holt in the cramped interrogation room, his hands folded tightly on the scratched table. The dim light cast shadows across his sharp features, revealing a man both guarded and restless. "All right, Detective," he began slowly, his voice steady but laced with something unreadable. "I'll tell you what happened that day." He spun. A story of attempted reconciliation, how he had reached out to Rowan, hoping to mend the fractures of their past. "We met at the trailhead, talked for a while. Things got heated, sure, but it wasn't meant to end badly." Theo insisted Rowan had left him alive and well, her silhouette fading down the path as he stayed behind. She wanted to go on alone, sighed she needed to clear her head. Then, with a hint of bitterness, he shifted blame toward Elias Vance. The mountain recluse Holt had already questioned. "I saw Elias watching from the trees. I don't trust that man." Maybe he followed her. Maybe something happened after I left? Holt studied Theo carefully, weighing his words against the fragments of evidence. Two men tangled in Rowan's disappearance, now pointing fingers at each other with no proof. Her mind raced, realizing the investigation had become a web of suspicion and silence. Neither confession nor denial was enough to untangle the truth from the shadows. As Theo's story faded into uneasy silence, Holt knew the mountain held its secrets tighter than ever, and her search for answers was far from over. The late season. Thaw crept slowly over the Cedar Hollow Mountains, melting away the last stubborn patches of winter's grip. Hikers ventured cautiously onto trails slick with runoff, eager to reclaim the wilderness after months of snow and silence. It was during one such expedition that a young hiker named Marcus stumbled upon a glacial cave nestled high among the peaks. Inside, the chill was bone-deep air thick with the scent of ancient ice and damp stone. But what caught Marcus's eye wasn't the shimmering blue ice. It was something stark and unmistakable, human bones, half buried beneath a thin veil. A frost, emergency crews arrived swiftly, cordoning off the area as forensic teams began their grim work. DNA testing confirmed what no one dared hope or fear. The remains were those of Rowan Clark, the missing woman whose disappearance had haunted the town for months. Yet the story the bones told was tangled and troubling. Some injuries suggested a fatal fall, fractures consistent with a tumble down a rocky slope. But others, bruises and lacerations on the ribs and skull, hinted at a violent struggle. Evidence of assault, of a desperate fight for survival. Detective Maren Holt stood silently at the cave's entrance, the cold wind biting through her jacket. The discovery brought no relief, only deeper shadows. Rowan's fate was now clear, but the circumstances remained shrouded in mystery. Who had attacked her? Was the fall accidental or forced? And what secrets had Rowan carried with her into the mountains, hidden beneath layers of pain and fear? The bones in the ice were a chilling reminder. The mountains kept their truths well, and sometimes the answers only led to more questions. Detective Maren Holt sat at her cluttered desk, piecing together the final fragments of Rowan Clark's shattered story. After weeks of chasing shadows, new evidence emerged that pierced the fog. Rowan had planned two separate meetings on the day she vanished. One with Theo Maddox, her volatile ex, and the other with Elias Vance, the mountain recluse. The discovery came from messages recovered from Rowan's phone, hidden behind encrypted apps and deleted texts. She had reached out to Theo, seeking closure, perhaps forgiveness, though the tone was strained and fragile. Hours later, she had arranged to meet Elias, desperate for help, someone to watch over her in the wilderness. She knew all too well. Holt's mind traced the tangled web of motives and betrayals. Theo, with his charm and menace, might have been trying to regain control, or worse, silence Rowan for good. Elias, haunted by his own demons, had a complex history with the mountains and a cryptic warning he had shared with Rowan. The two men, each with secrets and lies, occupied opposite ends of Rowan's fractured world. Their stories intertwined in a psychological maze of fear, desire, and manipulation. Holt imagined Rowan caught in the middle, seeking safety, yet stepping deeper into danger. The detective's voice softened as she read aloud Rowan's final message to a trusted friend. I don't know who to trust anymore, but I have to face it, alone or not. As shadows lengthened outside her office window, Holt understood that the truth was never simple. It lived in the spaces between words, between people, a fragile thread stretched taut over a chasm of darkness. The mountain held its silence still, but Holt was closing in. The next steps would bring her closer to answers or to the edge of despair. Detective Maren Holt sat back, her fingers tracing the edges of maps and timelines spread across the table. After months of gathering fragments, she was finally able to reconstruct Rowan Clark's final hours. Each piece fit together like the slow drift of ice in the mountain river, inevitable and cold. Rowan had been chased. The camera images, witness statements, and recovered messages painted a harrowing picture. She fled through dense forest, desperate to escape someone closing in. At the gorge's edge, the chase reached its climax. Panic surged through her veins. As she stumbled, trapped against jagged rocks and freezing water below, but the moment she fell into the icy depths, remained a haunting question. Was it an accident born of fear and exhaustion? Or a deliberate shove from someone determined to silence her forever? Holt's investigation into Theo Maddox and Elias Vance deepened. Both men's alibis, once thought solid, began to unravel under scrutiny. Theo's claimed absence conflicted with witness sightings. Elias's reclusive nature made his movements hard to track, but inconsistencies in his story raised suspicion. Yet, despite the crumbling defenses, no concrete proof linked either man directly to Rowan's final fall. The mountain's silence swallowed the truth like the cold water below, hiding the killer behind a veil of mist and shadow. As Holt stared into the foggy distance beyond her office window, she felt the weight of unanswered questions pressing down. Rowan's story was nearing its end, but the mountain still held secrets that refused to be forgotten. The river remembers all, they say. And soon, perhaps, so would justice. The case was closed quietly, with no charges filed. Detective Maren Holt had done everything she could. The evidence had run cold, the suspects silent behind walls of denials. Rohan Clark's disappearance became another unsolved mystery, swallowed by the mountain's relentless silence. Years later, Holt returned to Cedar Hollow, drawn by memories she couldn't shake. She laced up her boots and stepped onto the very trail where Rohan's last journey had begun. The forest was alive with whispers, leaves rustling in a gentle breeze, shadows dancing beneath the tall pines. As she walked, Holt's mind replayed the haunting images captured on that battered memory card. Rowan's terrified glance, the shadowed figure following her. The fear frozen in time, echoing through the trees. The trail wound deeper into the wilderness, the sunlight breaking through the canopy in scattered shards. Holt's breath came steady, but her heart pounded with the weight of what remained unanswered. Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, Holt caught a movement, a figure standing silently between the trees, watching. The scarf wrapped around the figure's neck was unmistakable, the same pattern, the same faded colors Rowan had worn. Holt stopped, her gaze searching the shadows, but the figure vanished like a ghost swallowed by the forest's embrace. The silence returned, thick, heavy, unresolved. The mountain held its secrets still, and some truths remained out of reach. But the echoes of Rowan's story lingered on the trail, haunting those who dared to listen. Detective Holt turned back toward the trailhead, carrying the weight of a case closed but never truly solved, a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be fully uncovered.